The biggest money laundering case in U.S. history just settled, so it seems like a good time to remind us all about Jeffrey Epstein and what it means. So TD Bank pled guilty and they're paying a $3 billion fine, which is probably less than they made from doing this. They were laundering money for all sorts of drug traffickers, including a whole bunch of fentanyl money. Check this caption here. TD failed to monitor over $18 trillion in customer activity for about a decade. Employees actually joked in their internal messaging services about how their motto is America's most convenient bank, and they joked about how it was America's most convenient bank for criminals. I mean, just last year, TD Bank had to pay $1.2 billion for their role in enabling Alan Stanford's Ponzi scheme, maybe the second biggest Ponzi scheme in American history after Bernie Madoff. So this is from Attorney General Merrick Garland's official statement. Over the course of a 3-year period, a person within the bank employees knew as David moved over $470 million in illicit funds through TD Bank branches in the United States. So there's 3 specific counts that Merrick Garland elaborates on, and the first one is this David guy. Because, when you're moving $470 million in and out of weird bank accounts, first names is really all you need to know. David's illegal conduct was obvious, to say the least. On more than one occasion, he deposited more than $1 million in cash in a single day and then immediately moved the funds out of the bank using official bank checks and wire transfers. Lower-level TD Bank employees were raising red flags all over the place. One in 2020 said, quote, "It's getting out of hand and my tellers are at the point that they don't feel comfortable handling these transactions." Another employee in 2021 said, quote, "How is that not money laundering?" A back office employee responded, "Oh, it 100% is." This is in their internal official messaging app service that is all on record. The second money laundering scheme that Garland lays out is 5 TD Bank employees conspired with criminal organizations to open and maintain accounts at the bank that were used to launder $39 million to Colombia, including drug proceeds. In yet a third scheme outlined in today's charges, a money laundering network maintained accounts at TD Bank for at least 5 shell companies. It used those accounts to move over $100 million in illicit funds through the bank. Again, internal chatter knew what was going on. For example, a compliance employee asked a colleague, "Why all the really awful ones bank here, lol?" A colleague replied, "Because we are convenient." But this is not unique to TD Bank. Just last year, Deutsche Bank was fined $186 million for basically doing the same thing, not taking any steps to counter money laundering and allowing criminal organizations to launder money through their banking services. In 2020, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists broke a massive story about this. The records show that 5 global banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank, and Bank of New York Mellon, notice they don't even include TD Bank, kept profiting from powerful and dangerous players even after U.S. authorities fined these financial institutions for earlier failures to stem the flows of dirty money. This massive report that they're referencing here, it noted $2 trillion in suspicious transactions identified within their set of documents, but it's just a drop in the far larger flood of dirty money gushing through. The FinCEN files, which is the files they're referring to, represented less than 0.02% of the more than 12 million suspicious activity reports that financial institutions filed within the FinCEN between 2011 and 2017. So I'm not a mathematician. You're about to know that for sure. But if $2 trillion worth of transactions is only 0.02% of the pool, then someone help me out here. $2 trillion divided by 0.02% equals 10 quadrillion? But when you ask the internet to just double check that in words, it tells you it's 1 quadrillion. It's a lot of money represented by all of these shady transactions. Again, I am no mathematician. I've been out of school for a while. What I'm trying to say is there's a ton of money flowing through transactions that are flagged as suspicious all the time at all the biggest financial institutions, and they're all turning blind eyes to it every day. And just so you know, ICIJ, these guys are the gold standard of journalism. Read the yellow there and read the yellow down here if you want to know how real journalism gets done. I'm not like these guys. I'm just a TikToker that hopefully reports as accurately as possible on the real journalism that guys like this do. It goes on and on, like forever. 2012, HSBC, $881 million for Latin American drug cartel. In half of these suspicious transactions, banks didn't have information about one or more of the entities behind the transactions. At least 20% of the reports contained a client with an address in one of the world's top offshore financial havens, meaning they didn't really know where this money was going or where it was coming from, depending on the instance. And again, these banks are doing this despite repeatedly being fined by the government and told by the government, don't you bad banks. And then the banks like JP Morgan, for example, back in 11, 13, and 14 are like, oh, sorry, we'll never do that again. But meanwhile, what was JP Morgan doing back in 2011, 13, and 14? Well, they were busy stopping laundering Jeffrey Epstein's money directly because he was kind of taking some heat. And then they just, rather than actually cut ties with him, they stopped handling his money directly and they kept on receiving his referrals of high net worth individuals. And this piece of reporting gets passed over all the time. I've talked about this before, but like Bill Gates, Sergey Brin, these guys are not getting referred to JP Morgan for their legitimate banking services. This is like I know a guy who knows a guy referral. He's referring them to the back door of the big bank where they are getting the not so above board money services, like money laundering, like money hiding, like Lord knows what. I mean, think about it. If you're getting a referral from Jeffrey about money services, you're getting a referral for the kind of things that Jeffrey is a pro at. And once again, once the bank cut like financial ties with Jeffrey Epstein and they closed all of his accounts, they continued to meet with him for years. Banker Justin Nelson had about a half dozen meetings at Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse between 2014 and 2017. Bank employees also met with Epstein after his accounts were closed to discuss other clients and introductions he could make to potential clients, the newspaper said. Hell, one of those clients, no later than 2019, was former Obama White House counsel Catherine Ruemmler. The following is a quote directly from evidence in a court trial. This was sent from Jeffrey's assistant to the bank. Quote, Jeffrey wanted me to reach out to you, his very good friend and former White House counsel to President Barack Obama, Kathy Ruemmler, his assistant wrote in the email. Quote, she would like to open an account with JPM. Jeffrey requests she deal with you personally. Might this be possible? I wonder why she couldn't just go in the front door and open a bank account like everybody else. And while I was just kind of checking in on who we're talking about here, I couldn't help but notice that she was named to the FINRA Board of Governors in 2021 after this whole thing. If you're not familiar with FINRA, they are the self-regulatory private corporation made of all of the bankers that is supposed to regulate the securities market, like, the stock exchange. So it's like, we know that it's all above board. And shout out archive.org, who at least has the Wayback Machine back online now, even though they've been under attack thoroughly for, a couple of weeks now, I think. But at least the Wayback is back on. And she was on the board of FINRA in 2022. She was on the board of FINRA still in April of 2023. And then she disappeared from their site sometime before February of this year. So end of last year, beginning of this year is when she left the board of FINRA, presumably. Which is interesting because this article was published August 18th, 2023. So maybe that's just a coincidence. But anyways, if you're not getting the picture by now, the black market is just as big as the white market. The illegal crime networks that rule our world. And so money laundering is just as important of a banking service as regular money services. And the banks are making probably dang near as much money in the black and gray markets as they are in the lit markets. So just remember, you're ruled by criminals, you're governed by criminals, you're given a credit score by these criminals, and then you're lectured on the news by these criminals. But you better stop eating cows because that is so bad for the environment, you filthy little peasant. You're going to ruin the Amazon rainforest.